Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Andrea Messina, and I'm the Executive Director of the Florida School Boards Association. With me here tonight, in front of you in this room, is Dr. Bill Vogel. He's on our Superintendent Search team, and out in the lobby welcoming you was Mr. John Reichert, also on our Superintendent Search team. We're all with the Florida School Boards Association. I do want to thank you sincerely on behalf of the Polk County School Board. They take their responsibility for hiring the next superintendent very seriously, and they know that your input and information and guidance is going to be instrumental in the decision that they make. We do appreciate those of you who are joining us on Zoom and those of you who are physically with us here. It's not the most conducive group meeting that we would all want, I know, but we are doing everything we can to make sure that we're all properly distanced and to make sure everyone remains safe. So at the very beginning of each of our meetings, we're going to start with public input. And Mr. Reichert, I believe you said we did get at least one piece of public input today, correct?
We did, Ms. Messina, but it was not related to the work of the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for those of you who couldn't hear, he said that the email that came into us is not necessarily related to the work of this committee. It is, however, related to the search, so what we'll do is pass that on to the school board members. It was a question having to do with asking the candidates how they're going to handle students with special needs, for example. We also want to go through some very preliminary pieces of information. I'm going to be using the PowerPoint down there, and we are going to have a time at the end here today when we can answer your many questions. We know you have a lot, and that's what we're here for today, is to kind of give you a foundation for the work that you're getting ready to do, answer any questions that you have, give you some materials to get you started on some of the work, and then we'll reconvene in 2 weeks and then again in 3 weeks, and we'll tell you what your homework is between now and the 2 weeks and then for the next week. So first we start with kind of what is a screening committee. This is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about what a screening committee is, what's the statutory authority of the school board, what are the responsibilities of each of you, what materials you can expect, and those of you who are here have printed copies. Those of you who were on Zoom, and even the people who are here, you had them attached to an email that you should have received earlier today. So those are some of the materials we'll go through. We'll talk about the entire process, and we'll also talk about the expected outcomes from the work of this committee. So a citizens screening committee is just that. It is a committee that is comprised of citizens. Now, you may or may not be aware, but each board member was able to put forth some names, and so we kind of shuffled through it. We looked for a nice cross-section of the community. We were hoping to get people from, this is a very large county, as you all well know, and so we wanted people from all different parts of the county. We were hoping for people representing different areas of interest, nonprofit, religious, business, civic, all kinds of things, so that we could get a good cross-section of the community, hoping that with all of your combined commentary that we'll have like at the next 2 meetings, we'll be able to come up with a nice pool of candidates that you can move forward to the board for their continued consideration. You all are appointed by the school board. You will be serving in an advisory capacity, and your job is going to be to screen the applicants against the board's criteria. Now, we're going to show you where you can get that information. One of the attachments to the email today, but also those of you who are here physically, have a printed version, and it's qualities we seek and qualifications. Those are the official criteria that the board set forth that you'll be comparing the applicants against. And then this committee is going to come up with recommendations that you're going to want to send to the board for candidates that you believe the board ought to continue to consider. So these are the people who are qualified. These are the people who we believe have the qualifications. You all ought to continue to consider this group. The committee does not rank candidates. You don't say this is our first choice, second choice, third choice. It's nothing like that. It is, these are all of the candidates we believe you ought to continue to consider. So that's how we move forward. When you report the final decisions, we ask that you please give the board the opportunity to know who the committee is recommending before you blast it on any social media. We had that happen in another county where somebody left the room, put it on social media before the board even heard about it. And we like to remind you that you're doing work that the board has requested you to do, so please have the courtesy of sharing the results of that work with the board prior to making it your social media postings. I'd like to start with the Constitution of the State of Florida, because this goes to the hiring authority of the superintendent by the school board. And if you look in Article 9, Section 4 of the Florida Constitution, it says that the school board shall operate, control, and supervise all free public schools within the school district and determine the rate of taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But the key here being supervise, that shows their authority over the superintendent. And then in Article 9, Section 4, it talks about the superintendent of schools. Now, in each school district, there shall be a superintendent of schools, the Constitution says, who shall be elected, or, when approved by a majority of the voters, shall be employed by the school board. So in this county, a majority of the voters at some time in the history chose to go from elected to appointed. Some of you were probably in the county back then, because I even remember when that happened. And now your school board appoints the superintendent rather than having it be elected. We also like to look at the Education Code, which is 1001.32 subsection 2 in Florida statutes, just to show that the responsibility, once again, for supervising all free public schools is under the operation of the district school board. And when we talk about this specific committee, what we ask you to do, and some of you have even called us in advance and said, hey, I might be late for a meeting, or I might have to attend virtually instead of physically, but we ask that you commit to all 3 meetings, which all of you did prior to showing up here. We ask that you do your very best to stick to the timeline. If there's a problem, we'll need you to communicate with either Mr. Reichert, Dr. Vogel, or myself. Really, really important issue is complying with the public records laws. And if you have not already taken the Sunshine Law training, which we made available by video for you all, through a link, you should have had it in some of your previous emails, but if for some reason someone has not yet taken the Sunshine Law training, let us know. We'll send you that link. Make sure you have it, because we don't want you to get in any trouble with the public records laws or the Sunshine Laws. And just as a kind of anecdotal thing, in your chairs here, for those of you who are physically here, you had a bunch of papers. You're probably going to make a few little notes on those papers as we talk today. That paper that you're making notes on is a public record. Anything that you do in the course of this committee towards the purpose of this work, notes that you take, anything like that, it's a public record, so it's going to need to be maintained. And at the end of your service of this committee, we're going to ask you to hand all those things in. We'll put them in a big box. Ms. Warbington will have them, and then if anybody asks for them as a matter of public record, they'll be available. We also ask that you enter into this service for your community with a fair, balanced, and respectful perspective and paradigm. We want this committee to do good and fair and balanced work. And once again, we're going to be asking you to think about those people who have applied, who the board ought to continue to consider. If you haven't taken the Sunshine Law training, do not leave tonight without talking to us so we can line you up for that. We're going to ask you to participate in an orientation, which you're already doing. In your packet, you've got at the back there somewhere questions not to ask that nobody can ever ask. These are the illegal questions. Stay away from them. So there's some acceptable questions guidance there, but we'll also talk next time we meet about some of the questions you might ask some of your professional peers when you are seeking to do research on some of the candidates that the committee thinks we ought to continue to consider. We're going to give you a copy of the timeline, which was attached to your email, but also in your seats. We're going to share with you some information pertinent to the school district. If you're not already aware of it, I'm going to show you where you can find it on their website. We're going to show you the results of the input and the survey information, which is also on the website. And Mr. Reichert is going to talk to you a little bit later about the candidate application packets. As you well know, there are over 20 applicants now, almost over 30 at this point. And so there's quite a number of candidates, and we expect more to be rolling in over the next few days. When we ask you to look at materials, the first place you might want to look for some information is on the polkschoolsfl.com website. And when you go there, one of the what we call sliders is the superintendent search. If you just click on that piece, as it's a big picture just like it shows here, it will take you to a smaller screen with some subtitled sections. And if you're looking for information about, for example, the qualifications or the community, you just click on that piece. But we're specifically, because of the function of this committee, looking at the superintendent qualifications. And that's the piece that was attached to your email, or the piece in your chair, which talks about qualities that you seek and qualifications. Now, the qualifications, as you can see, there are minimum qualifications, which are a master's degree from an accredited institution, 10 years of educational or equivalent business or governmental experience with at least 5 years in an executive leadership position, must be domiciled and maintain a homestead in Polk County within 6 months of employment. Those are the non-negotiables. Then we've got preferred, which is a doctorate, experience in a school district of at least 25,000 students, and experience as a superintendent, assistant superintendent, or other principal or other position of similar authority. So those are the real qualifications that you're looking at when you're doing your first set of vetting. Then, once we have a little bit smaller pool, we'll start looking at some of the qualities. You know, can they do the turnaround schools? Can they do this? Can they do that? But first, we want to make sure they have the qualifications. That's where we're going to start. The school district created, under their communications department, some promotional materials to try to recruit candidates for this position. And so I'm just going to kind of show you, if you haven't already seen, we call this the brochure, but it's just a promotional piece. And it was something that we sent out all across the country. And you'll notice from some of the applications, certainly they are from all across the country. But this is a piece of that. And then we go into some details about the district, where we've highlighted some of the district programs and educational offerings. Some of the district facts are here. The student demographic breakdown is here. So when you're looking for some of that kind of information, if you're looking for it to help guide you in your vetting process, you can look to this promotional piece, and this information from the promotional piece is on the website. Some community information, community facts, community demographics, and then once again, it's the qualifications and the qualities that the board is seeking. And by the way, those qualifications and qualities were gleaned from the surveys that we conducted through, some of them were face-to-face, not many because we got interrupted, but there was also an electronic survey that gathered information, and that's where that information came from. So what's the process of this committee? Well, we've got 3 meetings scheduled. You're going to continue to receive application packets as they come in. The last ones, since closing is Sunday, you will get, John, by Wednesday would be their final packets. Is that correct?
Andrew, I would say I'm probably going to have them out early Monday morning, those that come in on Sunday, and there will be some that will wait until, 10, 11 o'clock on Sunday night. So Monday afternoon, I'll certainly have them out to the committee members, because that'll just, every other day gives you more time.
Right. And as you get the application packets, it wouldn't hurt for you to start determining, do they meet the qualifications? Yes, no. And there will be some that don't. We know that. There are sometimes people who taught science for 1 year in Connecticut and they want to be your superintendent. And you go, wait a minute, that doesn't match up. So that's an easy one to kind of eliminate. But when you start looking at them, go ahead and start trying to consider whether or not they meet those minimum qualifications, and if they have any of those preferred qualifications. When you come to the next meeting, which will be February 11th, you should have a list of candidates with you that you personally believe the board ought to consider. You think these people meet the qualifications the board has set forth. Now, I'm just going to throw a number out there. It may or may not be valid. Let's say you get 45 applications. You may show up on February 11th and say, there's 20 people here that I think we should still continue to consider. Somebody else may say, I think there's only 5 that we continue to consider. Each of you come with whatever you think the number is of people that you believe this committee ought to continue to consider based on the qualifications. So that's what you're going to do between now and February 11th. We ask you not to rank the candidates. We don't want anyone to get invested. We try to keep the pool as broad and as open for as long as we can, because I will tell you, these candidates, many of them, this may not be the only county, the only place they're applying to be a superintendent. And so we don't want people to get their heart set on a single candidate and that candidate gets offered a job somewhere else, suddenly they're out of the pool and you don't have anybody else that you're willing to consider. So we try to keep the pool as broad as we can for as long as we can, because what we really want is the board to really do the narrowing. These are the 3, these are the 5 we're going to interview. All candidates who meet the board's criteria ought to be brought forward, and then this group will discuss, let me just let somebody in here, okay. This group will then discuss all of those people at the next meeting. So you'll bring your list of qualified candidates, and the committee here, you all, will discuss all of them. So the way it's going to work, can you see that? It's pretty small. Each of you has a line, if you can't see, and then we have the candidate numbers across the top. So when you come to February 11th meeting, let's say there were 45 who applied, and let's say you have 20 that you believe we ought to continue to consider. We'll start alphabetically, and we'll call your name. So we'll start with Ms. Bailey on the 11th, and we'll say, Ms. Bailey, who do you think we should continue to consider? And she'll say, well, I think we should continue to consider candidates 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, 22, 24, 17, da-da-da-da. And we'll just put little tally marks all the way across. And each one of you will tell us who you think we ought to continue to consider. And then we look at where the numbers fall. There are going to be some candidates that, let's see, there's a group of 42 of you. I would argue that there will be some candidates that 38 or more of you will say we should continue to consider this candidate. So we'll look at that. Maybe that will be 5 candidates, I don't know, but maybe it will. So we'll say there's 5 candidates, 38 or more of you think we should continue to consider. So then we ask you, okay, if 38 or more of you think we should continue to consider these 5 candidates, do you all agree we should keep them in the pool? Most times people will say yes, we'll put them aside, then we'll move to the next group. All right, now we only have between 25 and 35 of you thinking someone ought to stay in the pool. Should we keep these people? Then we go down between 15 and 25. Should we keep these people in the pool? And you can advocate on behalf of a candidate because you may have seen something in their packet that struck you, that somebody else may have missed. What we don't do, and what we don't like committees to do, is to try to discredit any of the candidates. These are all people who are accomplished in their professional careers, who have applied for a job. There's no reason for us as a citizens committee to discredit any of them along the way. We can focus on the highlights and the strengths of those candidates that we believe are stronger and have more to bring to the county. So we do not get into a negative conversation on any of the candidates. These are people who are applying for a job. We don't need to discredit them. Then we will come out of the February 11th meeting, after all of that part of conversation, and maybe the committee is down to 20. Maybe you all are still keeping 20 in the pool on the February 11th date. So of those 20, now what we ask you to do, and this is where the diversity of this group is really powerful, now we ask you to reach out to your professional peers and do some research on these people. So some of you are involved in chambers of commerce. You can pick up the phone from some of the communities where these people come from and say, hey, I'm with the Chamber of Commerce in Winter Haven, and this is the Chamber of Commerce such and such other place. What can you tell me about this person? Have they done anything with the chamber? You can get information because of your professional connection that will be more honest and come more faithfully to you than we could when we say we're a search firm helping a school district. Some of you will connect through religious organizations. Some of you will connect through governments. Some of you will connect through PTA or whatever your connection might be. We're going to ask you to reach out to your professional peers, do some research, then you'll come back on the 18th and say, gosh, you know what? I heard such great things about this candidate. Now, of those 20, you may say, I'm only really still looking at 10. And then you bring your 10 in, or your 8, or your 12, or whatever that number is, and we'll go through the same exercise where we'll tally them again. And we'll come out with, at the end of the 18th, a pool of candidates that that this committee agrees the board ought to continue to consider. It might be 8 people, it might be 18 people. We don't know, because it's up to the committee to say, yes, we believe these people ought to be considered. That list, that group, will then be turned into the board, and there's an official board meeting, John, you can give the date, I know you know it, where the board will accept your recommendations from this committee. The board, because of their role statutorily, which I started with, they're the ones that have the responsibility to do this. The board can take those, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say 12 names that come out of the 18th meeting. The board can say, yep, thank you for those 12 names. We're going to name these 12 people our semifinalists, and then the board takes over from there with semifinalist vetting questions. The board could also say, thank you for those 12 names. We're going to name 10 of them semifinalists because we don't see something in the other 2 that you all may have seen. The board could also say, thank you for those 12 names, but there's 2 more over here that we think you missed. We're going to bring them in, and now we're going to have a list of 14 semifinalists. The board has the ultimate authority to accept everything, add to it, or take away from it, because they're the ones statutorily that have the responsibility for making this decision. Let me stop there before I go into unconscious bias. Does anybody have a question just yet? And the way I'll do questions is I'll have one from the live room, one from Zoom, one from the live room, one from Zoom, just on the process so far. Let me see if anybody on Zoom has a question. All right, question. We do have one from Zoom. The question, the qualification says must be domiciled, maintain homestead in Polk County within 6 months of employment. Do we utilize their current address as indication of meeting this? No, we don't. What that actually is, and that's a great question, Naomi, that is a clear indicator to the applicants that there is an expectation that you will live and put in roots in the Polk County community. We're not asking for someone who's going to just be here during the weekend and go back home, or during the week and go back home on the weekend, or someone who's going to keep flying back and forth. This community wants someone who's going to make this their domicile, and so that particular qualification is actually written more to the applicants to be very clear on the expectation than on you all. So that's a great question. All right, so let me go into the unconscious bias, and we will answer more questions again later. We do ask you to be aware of biases and prejudices that we all have by virtue of how we were raised, where we were raised, who our family is, things like that. And one of the reasons that we use applicant numbers, for example, up here, is because we don't want you to get caught up in names. We don't want you to get caught up if it's a male or a female. We don't want you to get caught up if it's a doctor or a non-doctor. At this point, we use application numbers for the very reason of trying to minimize any unconscious bias that any of us may have. Now, that is not to say, and there is no intention that the community doesn't know who applicants 1 through 42 are. They're on your website. It tells you what applicant number the person is and their name. But as we're doing conversations, we try to stick with, I am putting forth applicant number 15. I support applicant number 12 to try to minimize any unconscious bias that we might have. So we just want you to be aware of it, try to avoid it, make sure that you're entering into this with an open mind and impartial judgment so that we can get the best pool of candidates for your school board. I've already mentioned that the board can accept your list, can add candidates, can remove candidates, but that one thing they cannot do is absolve themselves of the responsibility of making this selection. February 23rd is the date that the screening committee will provide the list of superintendent candidates to the board, and it's on that date that we will also ask the board to dissolve this committee. The reason that's important, and we've got our esteemed attorney in the back of the room. Wes, can you smile and wave so everybody knows? They saw you on the video, but there's Wes Bradshaw. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh.
Bridges.
What?
Bridges.
Yeah, I know it's Wes Bridges. Did I say Bradshaw again? Yeah, that is a different Wes. This is Wes Bridges. Thank you. I'm so sorry, Wes. You know what? How many? We have 67 districts in the state, and 2 of them are West Bs. But Mr. Bridges and I, doing the Sunshine training, one of the things that we talked about was communication between those of you on the committee and school board members. And we ask that you not have communication during the time that the committee is seated. So on the date of the 23rd, which is when they will accept the list, the application, the list of applicants that you believe the board ought to continue to consider, we ask them to dissolve the committee very specifically because then that makes you a citizen again. You're no longer on the committee, and then you can go back to regular communication with any school board member that you choose. But between now, since you're already here, and the 23rd, when they dissolve the committee, we ask you to please refrain from that because it will keep you out of hot water with regard to Sunshine, and we certainly don't want anyone to get in hot water on Sunshine. We will also start today, Dr. Vogel is going to go through with you briefly the applicant summary to date, and know that when the additional applications come in over the weekend, we will update this list, and then you'll have a full list from which to work. Dr. Vogel?
Thank you very much. You know, when I see Andrea presenting Zoom and also presenting to a live audience, I think of the teachers who are teaching both groups, and it's really a challenge to be able to do that, and we really appreciate everybody's patience with this. So far, in your package, you have a list of the 32 applicants. It's a summary sheet of whose applications we've received so far. So we have 32. Out of those 32, we have 21 that have earned doctorate degrees. And we did do a national search, as we mentioned before. We have applicants from 20 different states and 1 from Canada. 3 of those applicants are current superintendents, and 9 of those applicants have previous superintendent experience. So far, we have a very strong field from all over our country. As we have talked about, the deadline for the applications to be received is midnight this Sunday, January 31st. And we are expecting several more applications between now and then. And then by February 3rd, if not sooner, you'll receive a new set of a summary, and that will be complete for you to work through. Also, just a couple of notes. The School Board Association and the school board receive every application. We don't try to screen any application out. You receive everyone that we received. And as we've said, some may or may not meet the qualifications as you think, but you receive every one of those. So this is where you can get started, and you can take some notes on this if you'd like, or however you'd like to go from there. Andrea?
Thank you. Mr. Riker, could you talk to us about the applicant screening guide?
Yes, and committee members that are present, those of you on Zoom, in your packet or in the email that I sent to everyone last evening, you'll find a screening guide. This is for your use if you choose to use it. Please remember, if you do use it, that you have to maintain it as part of the public record. And at the end of the search, when you turn your documents in, if you've used this document, you should turn that in as well. If I could just take a few minutes and run through it. The formal education that we've kind of discussed before, the doctorate is preferred, the master's is required. Certifications, we put that in there because some of the packets that you've received, some of the candidates have provided you with a copy of their current certifications that they hold. The educational experience, there's the required, which Ms. Messina talked about, the required experience of 10 years, as she mentioned, and then there's the preferred. So if you need a quick reference, that's on here as well. And of course, the board has approved these, and those are the requirements, minimum and preferred, that we used in our advertisements. The second page is just a place where you can put the size of any previous districts. As Ms. Messina mentioned, that the board has put in a preferred of at least 25,000 students. So if you see a candidate that you like that has 20,000, you may want to consider keeping that person in your list because it is a preferred requirement. Employment, there's some places for you to put their current role, the organizations or responsibilities they have. And then you may want to look for any gaps in employment. Sometimes the gaps in employment could be a trigger to say, let me look a little deeper, or maybe make a few more peer checks with my peers. Then we put some of the leadership qualities that our board members have identified through some of our previous work sessions. There's evidence of personal leadership qualities, evidence of instructional leadership qualities and student accountability, which is a big one. Evidence of business, finance, and operations is also something you may want to look for in these candidates. And the last one, and a very important one, is evidence that this candidate has good qualities as they relate to board, staff, and community relations. So those are kind of the 5 basic areas that you may want to look through a resume to kind of gauge where you'll place that person. Based on some of the other committee work that we've done in other districts, as you look through the applications, there may be a group of people that you're going to say, I just can tell from the resume that maybe this is not the candidate we're looking for. There will be some, as Ms. Messina mentioned, that probably every one of you will say, this is a prime candidate. That's kind of a top group. You may have a group at the bottom. And this document may be useful when you get to that middle group that you say, you know, I'm not quite sure, let me spend a little more time on this group of persons, and this may be helpful for you. So this is why we want to provide you with this. If you choose to use it, certainly you don't have to, but if you do, please keep it as part of the public record. Ms. Messina?
All right, so now we're going to once again pause and see if there are any questions that you all have. Yes, sir. And excuse me, I will repeat your question so the people on the camera can hear it when you're done.
yourself justice to do it that way? How would you do it? Is it something you would talk about later on? You talking about it before?
Okay, so he asked a question regarding the qualification, which was a preferred qualification of experience in a school district of at least 25,000 students or the comparatively sized government or business organization, knowing that this county is much larger than that. So the reason it's a preferred qualification is because when the board talked about it and when the community gave input on it, there was some perspective that, you know what, there could be some really great performing someone who maybe hasn't had experience with 25,000, but they may have enough other qualifications that would make them someone that would be in the pool to continue to be considered. We would suggest that if you see enough of other things that obviously, based on what you're saying, I'm hearing that maybe you're looking personally for someone with 50,000 or more, or 75,000 or more, let's say. But maybe the other candidates that have less than that, there's enough other good qualifications that they can show you that you're like, I don't want to rule them out. I'm not convinced that they have enough experience with a large enough district, but I'm not going to rule them out. So we would ask you to keep them in if you feel like you can. Wouldn't necessarily rule them out. It's preferred. And so at the end, let's say after the February 18th meeting, this committee has 12 names, like I said. Some of them may not have over 25,000 experience. Some may have 100,000 or more experience. And then the board can kind of shuffle through whether they really believe that that's enough of a priority. Mr. Vogel, and then I'll come back to you, sir.
I'd like to add to what Mrs. Messina is saying. Polk County is one of the largest school districts in the entire country. And if you eliminated everybody with that with 25,000 or more, or the size of Polk County, you'd have an extremely small pool. You'll also find there are a number of people in there that may have worked in a large school district that might have had 50 or 75,000, and they may be a superintendent or an assistant superintendent in a school district with 20,000 or 10,000 or 15,000. So you have to weigh it very carefully. And we debated this, and the community input sessions that we had personally, the people really brought this up. Another factor is that this is not, the qualifications allow someone who's not necessarily an educator to apply. So someone could be head of a business that had a large operation, but it might not have 100,000 students like Polk County or 100,000 people working for it. So that's why we say just leave that open, and that's why that's preferred.
And sir, did you want to add something else?
What I was concerned about is that what he just said,
Yes.
is that it may not be a educator that you gonna have to lead your district. Well, I'm scared of that. I'm not afraid of that myself. Because that's the main focus of what we're looking for, is somebody that in education that's gonna take the district to where we want it to go. So we gotta be thinking on that too. I mean,
Absolutely.
the board members gotta be thinking of that. There may be some outside, they look at it differently, but the whole of the thing is about educating our children. And there gotta be somebody got that's gotta be, to me, got to be the main thing.
Correct.
Main thing got to be, the main thing got to be the main thing. If you don't, we're out of trouble.
Yes, sir. Thanks,
And-
Bishop Mincy.
I don't know if those of you on Zoom could hear what he said, but he was advocating for someone specifically that does have an education background because he believes education is the main focus of this job, whereas the qualifications as they're written, as they came in through surveys and through board approval, allow for someone outside of education to be considered. He was just simply advocating that from his perspective, he believes the education piece is important. Is that a fair reflection? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have any questions on Zoom from somebody? Aha. So one of the questions is, for those out-of-state candidates, is a relocation package included in their compensation? That's something that will be negotiated once a job offer is made to a candidate. Typically, there would be relocation, but that is a negotiated item between the chosen, selected superintendent and the board when they negotiate a contract. Another question from the room, and then I'll come back to a Zoom question. All right, let me go to the next Zoom question is, we will all be taking notes of some type on each candidate, even if we use sticky notes. To be clear, all notes must be turned in at the end of the process. That is correct. Whether it's a sticky note, whether it's a napkin, whether it is the back of your letter envelope, anything, because anything you do that is in the course of this work for this committee is a public record. And we say that's true of text messages. If you, when we get to the point where you're communicating with your professional peers, if you happen to know somebody in the county personally as a friend, or even it's a cousin, who knows, and you text them, hey, what can you tell me about Dr. Bill Vogel, who just applied to be our superintendent? A text message is a public record. If it's not even on your phone, maybe it's your spouse's cousin, and you ask your spouse to ask, hey, what do you know about Dr. Bill Vogel? He just applied to be superintendent in Polk County. Just because it's your spouse's phone, that doesn't absolve you. It's your information that you are gaining on behalf of your work on this committee. That makes it a public record. Another question in the room? Yes, sir.
What has been the experience in the last superintendent that you all have hired? Those people, like size of the district, what has been?
What has been the size of the districts that... Yeah, let me pull that up. John, do you have that handy? You might. We just placed superintendents within the last year in Escambia County, in Martin County, in Sarasota. Volusia was not far, that was a little over a year ago.
Right.
St. John's?
I'm sorry?
St. John's?
St. Johns County, Flagler,
Brevard County.
Brevard, which is 80,
Osceola.
90.
Yeah, Osceola, which is large.
Do you have those numbers handy, John?
Yes, I can tell you from our last 6 searches, as far as the number of applicants that were received in the districts, Flagler had 35, Escambia had 27, Martin County had 45, Sarasota 34, St. John's 30, and Volusia had 40. So the applicants, for an average of 35 for these previous 6 districts. So I think in the end, your applicant count will be higher than any of these.
So what was the size of the county?
We could give you an idea. Martin County is about 20,000. Brevard County is about probably 75 or 80,000. Then St. John's is about 30. We can get that exact information if you would like. Osceola is about 75,000. You know, we have conducted searches in all size school districts throughout Florida, from small districts to large districts. And this same issue came up in Martin County. In fact, Martin County has 20,000 students. The person they hired came from a large district in Kentucky that had, I think, 10,000 students. 5,000 students? A large district in Kentucky with 5,000 students. So that's the challenge, that there's very few districts in the whole country that are as large as Polk County.
Yeah, that is true, and the average school district across this country actually has fewer than 1,000 students. They're very, very small, and just to give you an idea, Florida has 67 school districts, Texas has several thousand, Ohio has 900 and something, so they do, like, much, much smaller school districts, and Florida really has much larger comprehensive school districts. I actually have the data here. St. John's was 36,000, Sarasota's 42,600, Alachua was 27,000, Flagler's 13,000, Brevard 73,000, Volusia 61,600. Flagler, we did 2 searches for them. Their student count actually went up slightly, 13,184. Sarasota had 44,000 the second time around. Martin had 18,500, and Escambia had 40,500.
And Osceola?
I didn't have that number
Okay.
on there. Mr. Bridges. Hey, Wes, do you want to come to the microphone so the people on Zoom can hear? Thank you, sir.
The reason for that is that Florida is different from most of the other states in that each county comprises a school district. In most other states, they have unified school districts. If you go to Jefferson County, Alabama, which is Birmingham, I think they've got 17 school districts in the county. In Florida, each county comprises its own, so you don't have separate school districts for individual cities. That's why Polk County, which we don't think of as being big city, is the 9th largest school district in Florida, and it's usually somewhere in the 40 range nationwide. So we're a big district. In Florida, we're still a large district, but nationwide we're a huge district simply because the entire county is included within it. Does that make sense? Thanks.
Mr. Reichert.
Ms. Messina, if the committee would like, there is a document that I pulled probably a year and a half ago. It was some national data, which had like the top 100 school districts in the United States by size. If I can pull that, it may not be the current data this year, but it will be within the last 2 years. And I think it will really kind of exemplify for y'all that, you know, a district this size as Polk County is a rarity in the United States. It really is. So I'll try to make a note, try to find that, and send that out to y'all tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Maybe other people know this. As just background information, our current superintendent, how big, before she came here, how large of a school district did she come from, or what was her experience before, and did she have a doctorate?
She actually came from Duval County before she came here. Duval is larger than Polk. I don't have that number in front of me, and she did not have a doctorate degree. She does have a master's degree. Yes, ma'am?
Ballpark, don't hold me to it, but Duval's around 130,000 students.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I could ballpark it too, but if I get it wrong, I get skewered, so thank you. And I never give student data unless it's written down somewhere, because there's too many errors. But I will tell you, there is an argument for someone who, as Dr. Vogel mentioned, someone who has worked in a larger district, maybe now is a deputy in a smaller district, but they do have the experience of a larger urban district. And there's also an argument for someone who's kind of moving up. It just depends on, it's really looking at the package that they bring. I try to tell the school boards themselves, and I'll tell all of you, really what you want is Superman or Superwoman, but that does not exist. So you have to decide what you're going to give on to get something else. And I also tell communities and boards, you need different things at different times. So we work with one district where the superintendent truly, in the middle of a board meeting, resigned, walked out the door, like literally left, resigned, walked out the door. It was because of a financial shortage that they had. So they were clearly looking for a new superintendent that had financial acumen. Another situation could be a school district that might be knowing that they have to go out for some sort of a tax referendum. They would be looking for someone who can do community outreach really, really well. So it kind of depends on what your community is looking for at any given time, and what you're looking for in this search might have been different than what you were looking for 10 years ago, or will be looking for 10 years from now. There's another question that says, The analytics per district would be helpful. John, I think you were the one who said you had that data. And also, what we will try to have done too is when we look at the summary of applicants, we do try to come up with the size of the district that
They're
they've
all
been
in
in.
there.
Yeah.
Right, we have those all included in those.
So that's
Yeah.
on the piece that you already have.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Let me ask you another one. Of the ones that you've done in the last 6 months or a year, whatever it was you were looking at, John, how many of them had PhDs?
You know what, we do keep that
We have
data.
that
I would
information.
say I would say more than half of the applicants typically have doctorate degrees.
Hired.
Oh, that are hired.
Okay,
Dr.
we
Millay,
can-
Dr. Smith, Dr. Asplin,
Oh, those were, yeah, those were the
Dr.
last
Fritz,
Kathy didn't have it, so
No.
I think
5 out of 6.
5 out of 6.
Yeah, and some, we have tried to look at, is there data that shows that a doctorate degree gets higher student achievement? Is there data that shows that a doctorate degree doesn't get higher student? We've looked at all sorts of angles, and the truth of the matter is there's no conclusive data. But it is an education institution, and for some people, that is important. The question for those of you on Zoom was, of the last several superintendent searches that we've conducted, how many that were hired had doctorate degrees? And we said 5 of the last 6 had doctorate degrees.
And 21 out of the 32, as I said, that have applied have doctorate degrees.
Any other questions on Zoom? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I can't see from back here.
In looking at your superintendent search screening guide, what is of paramount importance to me? And I don't see which component the person would put it under, but is any best practices that that person may have implemented, any specific programs? I would want to know about those kind of things. And I'm looking and I don't see a component where the person can expound on that, but that is of paramount importance to me. Have they done anything in particular? Any best practices? Have they implemented any specific programs? And those kind of things would be very important to us screening.
So his question, Dr. Vogel, I'll let you, can you reiterate the question first and then?
Sure. The individual was wondering where on the screening guide any innovative programs or special successes or were indicated, where you would indicate that. And that is certainly very important. And I think when you look at the qualities that the school district is seeking, and when you see these individuals' resumes, you're going to be able to, those will be pointed out very loud and clear. And that certainly is very important. In fact, normally what the applicants do is they look at the sheet, whatever the qualities are, and they try to focus their resume or their cover letter on how they meet those qualities. So I think you're going to see that. Those are going to be loud and clear in most of these resumes that you look at.
Mr. Reichert, did you want to?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, then we will see you again on the 11th. You will continue to receive applications as they come in. If you're one of our Zoom guests and you would like printed materials because you don't want them electronically, can you drop your name in the chat so I can make sure that you're on the printed materials list? Those of you who are physically here, Mr. Reichert, I think asked you that question on the way in. We very much appreciate your time, effort, and energy. If you have any questions, you can contact any one of the 3 of us. Our information is on the website. You can contact Susan Worthington over here. She's with the school board member's office, and she'll answer questions that you have. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your service to your community. The board recognizes the importance of this decision and really appreciates your help in getting them to that. Thank you.
Thank you.